First of all, before we begin our short reflection on the readings, particularly the Gospel of today, the Seventh Sunday After Pentecost, according to the calendar that is proper to the extraordinary rite, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Father John Thomas Msgr, who, although he is from our city of Cebu, of our Archdiocese of Cebu, is actually currently stationed in Egypt, for he works for the Apostolic Nunciature, and his present assignment is in Egypt. So we welcome him, and we are very happy to have him with us today. Having said that, let us now begin our reflection on today's readings. I have always made it a point to connect the readings taken from the lectionary that is proper to the ordinary form of the Mass, or the Mass that is currently celebrated in most, if not in all of our parishes, with the readings that is proper to the extraordinary rite. That way, even if you have not attended the ordinary, or the Novus Ordo as we call it, or the ordinary rite of the Mass, you will still be in touch with the readings that has been reflected upon by many. And today's readings, intended for this particular Sunday, speaks about the theme which connects to the readings that has been presented to you in English in your copies of the text, connects with the theme of falsehood. Falsehood. The Novus Ordo reading speaks of the weeds and the wheat, and the weeds being planted by the hand of an enemy to ruin the crops. Today's readings from the extraordinary rite speaks also of false prophets dressed in sheep's clothing. So it's still all about falsehood. There is a story that I recently heard from a pastor who was preaching celebration by traditional liturgy about the legislations, the American legislation now in favor of abortion. We take note of the fact that prior to 1973, almost all states in the United States are against the practice of abortion. But in 1973, there was a turnaround case that the Supreme Court decided upon after 3 long years. This was the case of Roe versus Wade. And the petitioner is a woman who goes by the name Jane Roe, which is actually a fictitious name for Norma May McCorvett, if I remember the name correctly. Norma did not even have an abortion in her lifetime. She had 3 pregnancies since she was 16 up to her 21st birthday. She gave birth to all 3 children that came out of her womb. But it was because of her that the present legislation, which is mostly in favor now of abortion as some kind of a health care service, came about. And that is the standard norm of today, at least insofar as I am aware of in the US. Norma, or Jane Roe, as she calls herself, presented initially that she was a rape victim, only because she wanted a favorable judgment in favor of abortion, which would have been illegal if she had conceived this child voluntarily with her partner. And although it was detected that early that it was a lie, 2 women lawyers who wanted to make a name for themselves at the price of truth decided to challenge the legislation of the state and made sure that this case will win in favor of what they want it to be, the outcome to be. And so it was from them that the famous legislative excuse came about that it's woman's privacy to decide on the things that affected her body. The first trimester of pregnancy is open to any possibility, including the possibility that what will come out may not eventually become a living person, and so on and so forth. The important thing, however, is after years of believing in all this seeming, if not realized, that we're told in defense of abortion, Norma, just before her death in February of this year, had a conversion, underwent a conversion. She worked for most of her life in an abortion clinic, but while sitting at her desk in front of a poster that reflected the development of the fetus inside the womb of the mother, she suddenly saw the truth as she has never seen it before. She always knew that it was the truth, but it didn't hit her until this moment that what was shown in the pictures of how a baby comes about in the womb is actually true. That from the start, there is a human person involved, not just a product of conception, which depersonalizes the fetus. And so she left her work in an abortion clinic and later converted to Catholicism, where she became a pro-life advocate up until the time of her death in February of this year. But although the truth has been told, the legislative system considers it moot to change legislations just because finally the truth has come out. But at least we know all these things are founded on what is actually falsehood. Another case in point is a 1949 commercial for Camel cigarettes. In this commercial, you have something similar to the Safeguard ad that we see on TV. Safeguard is something that is used by many doctors. So in this Camel cigarette ad, one doctor said, Camel is the preferred brand of most of the doctors of the United States. Which, looking back at it now, is a very funny admission made by a doctor, knowing how and what damage smoking does to the human body. And in fact, our cigarette products now carry graphic warnings about what smoking does to the body, other than simply telling us that it kills. It shows us pictures of what patients go through once they're hit by the consequences of their smoking habits. It takes time before the truth comes out. It takes time for us to mature, to realize one day and ask ourselves the question, what have we been thinking? Or more importantly, what have I been thinking? The Novus Ordo readings about the weeds and the wheat, in conjunction with the idea about being aware that we be careful of false prophets, may speak to us of three possibilities in terms of interpretation. That there is still so much evil in this world in the form of lies and false truths, or fake news as we call them now, that covers up the goodness that is very much still in the world. Or that we can say that even we ourselves, who claim to be good people, have some hidden weeds, have some traces of falsehood in our own lives. And I suppose when you look at what the readings from the Extraordinary Rite says about prophets dressed in sheep's clothing, an early commentary on this reads that the sheep clothing represents the semblance of religion, represents a form of Christianity that seems to look all right on the outside, but something is deeply wrong with it in the inside. It is some kind of a fake Christianity. And that fake Christianity could not just be reflected of people who promote heresies. It could also be true of us when our conduct do not match what we claim to believe, in. But there is also a third possibility in interpreting all these readings combined, and that is God in His mercy gives us the hope of salvation by making us realize our mistakes before it is too late. And when that moment comes, we must seize the opportunity to change and to respond to His invitation. That once we see that we have been having weeds in our possession, we must be ready to give up the weeds and burn them completely. Once we realize that we have not been properly dressed, because we claim to be dressed in sheep's clothing, although there is still something of the wolf in us, then we must be ready to have a change of clothing, so to speak. When we begin to realize that one day, what have I been thinking? What have I been doing? That is a grace moment that must not be taken lightly, for it may never come again. And God's patience may not afford us a second chance if we continue to insist in our errors, in our false judgments, in our false thinking, in our way of life that is far from the truth of what our faith calls us to become.